that's what I did. So when I go to that, I can give you the meeting code if you want.
I'm trying to get Sarah going here.
Focus on Sarah, then call me. That's fine. Take care, Sarah. We'll worry about mine later. It's no big deal. Jason's on the phone with us. We're totally good.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's because you didn't end the GOAT one properly. Because you can only be the host of one at a time.
Can you hear?
Back in an hour. Bye.
Deb, I lost you.
We were temporarily kicked off there, but she fixed it.
Yeah. So Sam,
Desert.
it's technology. Fantastic when it works well. It's embarrassing when it doesn't. So we can only have 3 of these going at a time, and we had one person who failed to end one of the meetings before he started a new one. So that bounced us all off. So
Gotcha.
sorry. Very sorry about that.
That was me back to my lack of technological, prowess.
Yeah, it's when we have so many seminars going on simultaneously or consecutively, I guess, it's really important to end one before we start on a new one. So we're getting the hang of it.
Trouble.
We might mute everyone, Deb. Perfect.
All right. Well, I hate to hold up everybody too much longer, so maybe we want to get started and I'll just keep letting people in.
Sure. So my name is Thor Stacy, and I'm going to I'm introducing and starting this this segment here. And so I'm a registered guide here in Alaska. I've been guiding. I'm a lifelong Alaskan. Been guiding for little over 20 years now, 22 years. And optics, that's the subject here. Steris alone is going to be taking the floor here in a second, but there's nothing that's more important at the critical moment of a hunt than optics. Your scope has to be resistant to being knocked. It can't be fogged. It's got to be accurate and repeatable. And there's this kind of trend of people wanting to be able to adjust their scopes to shoot at longer range in the field is going on. Optics, optics, optics. We're a sight predator. We spend thousands of hours behind our binoculars. So this is just a really awesome segment. I've had the good fortune to see some of Sarah's talks and presentations in the past. So write your questions down. Get some thoughts on the side as she's going through. There's going to be a good question and answer period afterwards. And then just finally, for everyone on the call here, remember, this is a chance for you to schedule one-on-one meetings with the guides, the exhibitors that are here. We have amazing promotion going on. So if you're interested in a hunt in Alaska and you purchase one during the expo, you are entered into a drawing for an $8,000 floor credit towards that hunt or another hunt or whatever you've booked with the exhibitors. And I can tell you right now that I don't think a hunt's been booked yet. People are a little unsure on how to use the Zoom scheduling function. So when we get done and you go to the expo site, look up the exhibitors, see their calendars, set a Zoom meeting with them. There might be some time left. Well, there is time left tonight. We keep going for another 3 hours here tonight. And then you have a chance to set meetings tomorrow with guides. And if you're interested in coming to Alaska, just think of it like you're at a normal show and you swing by our booths and have a chat with us. There's no we want to talk to you. We want to have those. We want to see you. We want to answer your questions. We want to have the chance to talk about hunting, and there's no better time to do it. So With that, Sarah Stallone is going to take the floor here. Like I said, jot your questions down. Be ready to ask them. Sarah's great. She's got a ton of information. I think a million answers for a million questions. So with that, Sarah, it's great to see you, and I'll let you take this away.
Thor, thank you so much. Yeah, what a fun event. Deb and so many others have worked really hard to put this together, and all of the guides. It's really fun to see at least the little thumbnail photos or your logos pop up. So many of you from years past, and missing everybody in person for sure. But it's really fun to see you on here, at least digitally, right? This is great. Can everybody hear me okay? Give a head nod to a couple of you that are still on video. There we go. All right. So there is a chat function on here. If you are on a computer, it's kind of in the middle at the bottom of your screen. There's a little chat box. If you want to click that and pull up that chat window, I'll take questions through that would be easy. Right now, the video is coming in differently from different parts of the US here. So we'll try video, but the best thing is probably to type in questions there in that chat box. If you're on a mobile device, it's in a drop-down menu. But yeah. So like Thor said, keep those questions coming. I'd love to hear those. Let me back up a minute. I'm Sarah Stallone, and I get to work with Leupold Optics. What a fantastic company made here in the US, just made tough. One of their taglines is that the Leupold is trying to outlast and outperform all other optics. And yes, I believe that. That's great. But on the other hand, I'm kind of here to talk about how you can outperform with an optic you already have, regardless of the brand. And so though I work for Leupold Optics and some of my examples are going to be from them, you can have any optic. I really want to focus today on just a couple of elements that can help you set up an existing optic to work the best for you in the field, and particularly in Alaska. If you're spending money to come up here, many of you have dreamed your whole life to be on a hunt in Alaska. And we get to live here, and we get to take you on some of those hunts, which is just amazing. But there's nothing we want more than for your gear to work well, especially for Alaska. And that's kind of what I want to focus on in today's little seminar. So good times. I want to dive right in, speaking to optics specifically, and first mention that optic failure, more often than not, is actually due to incorrect mounting, putting it on the rifle incorrectly. So there's one element I've got here at the bottom part of a scope ring. I'll be talking about mounting. And I have an example card here, of course, from Leupold. But if an optic is going to have an issue, it's going to lose its function, it's going to break in some way, it's going to fog, it's going to accept water, you'll have water rattling around in your eyepiece. More often than not, we can actually trace that back to a mounting issue. So I want to open up the presentation today by saying, if you're thinking about a hunt and you're putting together your gear, one thing to be extra aware of is when you put that scope on your rifle, you've got rings. Most rings come with an instruction manual, and inside that manual will be a suggestion for the inch pounds to torque or to mount that optic. So if you're self-mounting, you're not taking it into an optics store of some kind, be very, very careful to follow the spec from the manufacturer on the torque or how tight you get those screws on that optic. Interestingly enough, over tightening, which, I mean, how many of you just crank down on something? Oh, that's good enough, right? These are not radiator hose clamps. This is scope mounts for the hunt of a lifetime, right? Over tightening can create pressure issues inside, which then can lead to fogging. So unless you have a super, super tough scope of some kind, it's possible that even incorrect mounting is compromising that scope. So while we're talking about ways to optimize your optic, get the highest performance out of it for an upcoming hunt, I'm going to start there with mounting. Please be aware of what your manufacturer, your scope ring manufacturer suggests for torque spec, and make sure you're not over tightening those scope rings. Even for 338 guys, right? 375 H&H, I don't care what the caliber is, keep going by the manufacturer's torque spec. We'll talk more about that. If you have questions, again, that chat box is kind of in the middle of your screen on the bottom. If you want to put in any comments or questions there as we go through this, yeah, type them in there. So torque spec mounting correctly is really important for that optic. If we're optimizing it for your hunt of a lifetime, that's going to be a big deal. I want to talk also about something else, which is eye relief. Most of you are aware of this, especially because of the hunting that you do in Alaska, but I want to speak to proper eye relief really quickly here. When a scope is mounted on a rifle, you have the option to put this optic in several different places in most cases. And each individual is different. The length of your neck, the length of your arms, different elements here affect where you put that optic on your rifle, and then how that optic relates to your eye when that rifle's mounted to your shoulder. So just as an example here, this particular rifle has been set up for me, and I happen to really prefer an eye relief of about 4 to 5 inches. That works really well for me. Eye relief, I guess in basic, is just the distance that the scope can be from your eye, and you as the shooter can still view a full image of your target. I don't know how many of you have seen before, there's these black fuzzy edges, this half moon. When you're looking through a scope, you'll get some kind of, I guess there's some black ring around your target image, and it looks like you're not really being able to see the full view. That's possibly due to eye relief. The scope is too close or too far away from your eye. When a scope is adjusted correctly, that eye relief will allow you a full view of your target. That's really important, especially for a moving target, possibly. So your animal's walking away, or you're trying to view something that's a long ways away. That's really important. So if you're still in the mounting stage, I want you to pay a special attention to eye relief. And eye relief is extremely important, again, for viewing your target, but also for your safety. The industry out there, this shooting sports industry, says that mounting a scope a distance of 2.5 inches away from your eye is safe, right? 2.5 inches is enough eye relief for anybody. I kind of want to laugh because I don't think they've ever shot a .338 before if they say 2 inches of eye relief is great, right? So if my eye is too close to this scope, what do you think is going to happen, right? When I fire this gun, I'm probably going to get this beautiful half. How many of you have done that before? Anybody? Anybody? All right, I've got Paul's being honest. I don't know about the rest of you.
It's blind leading blind, and it's killing me.
If you have ever gotten that half moon badge there, you know that they face wounds bleed a lot. It's a big deal. It makes for great photos.
When we're going to have the housing survey fielding.
I hope. I worked on the first draft of the survey.
That's all good. We got a couple of microphones still on there. No worries. But back to eye relief here. If you're planning on coming up for a hunt and you're mounting your scope, you've mounted it correctly now with torque spec, pay also special attention to that eye relief. Make sure that scope is far enough away from your eye that you don't end up compromising or getting too close to smacking yourself in the face. Note also, when you're mounting a scope, that the bench rest shooters of the world, we tend to mount a rifle quite a ways away from our eye, right? So we have all the time in the world, we're bench rested, we're comfortable. We tend to mount that rifle with additional eye relief. When I'm about to save my life from a charging bear, or I have that one split second opportunity to take the only shot I've gotten all this 10-day hunt, we tend to suck up a little bit more on that rifle. So note that eye relief is going to be extra important. Pick something that's a medium, something between bench rest and save my life there. Make sure that scope is far enough away from your face to avoid getting hit. That's important as well. Okay, so moving on, we talked about mounting the scope rings correctly. Don't over torque, that creates pressure issues. You could actually fail an optic. It could get moisture in there. Make sure your eye relief, you've mounted that scope far enough away from your face that you won't get hit, but you can still see your full target image correctly. That other thing I want to talk about is actual focus, just viewing your target through a scope. This does not have to be done with a loop-holed optic. I don't really mind what brand you have. You might have Swarovski or Vortex. I don't mind what you have. This works for everybody. Have any of you ever been at the range, or maybe this is you, and you sit down to shoot and you look through your scope and it appears that the target is clear, but the reticle is really fuzzy. Or the reverse might be true, where you're looking at the target and the target's really fuzzy, but the reticle's super clear. Or you see your buddy over on the next bench just cranking away on this eyepiece focus, trying to bring the target in focus, or trying to make the reticle focus. I want to speak specifically to eyepiece focus for just a second. When you're setting up an optic to work the best it can for you, this is the very first thing I want you to do. Again, this works with any brand. When you look through an optic and you adjust this eyepiece focus, a lot of people believe this to be a focus for the target. Well, that's not true. So cranking away on an eyepiece focus is really not going to help your target come into clarity there. What this focus does is work for the reticle. So eyepiece is all about focusing a reticle. So let's take a blank piece of paper here. Have a buddy hold up a piece of paper at the range, or look at a blank wall at the gun store, at your home in your gun room, whatever. I want you to view through your scope that blank page, that blank wall, and look at your reticle. If the reticle is super sharp, then you're good to go. If the reticle is fuzzy, that's what your eyepiece focus is for. So as you're optimizing this optic to you, make sure that the reticle is focused for you, and that's what you use the eyepiece focus for. So here's how we do this. I'm looking at a blank wall, right? I'm going to put the scope up to my eye, and I'm going to look, but just for a second. Our eyes are elastic. Your eyes are going to start to try to focus, and you're going to mess this up. So look briefly, and then look away. Was that reticle in focus, or was it fuzzy? Oh, it was really fuzzy. Okay, adjust that eyepiece focus and look back. All right, it's still fuzzy. Okay, adjust it a little bit more. Keep trying. Well, that's getting better. Okay, all right, nice and clear. Let's try that again. Oh, nope, it's getting fuzzy again. All right, so you're taking little peeks through the scope, a little bit at a time, looking for reticle clarity. This has nothing to do with the target. Just remember, this is all about the reticle. Once you've adjusted your eyepiece focus to your eye, this scope is now better optimized for you. When you look at the target the next time, it's funny how clear the target then looks after you focus that reticle. So any of you that have ever thrown a rifle up and thought, wow, my target's really blurry, but my reticle's clear, or vice versa, my reticle's really clear, but my target's really fuzzy, know that that's what your eyepiece focus is for. When we're setting up this scope to work for you, you really truly want to be able to throw the rifle up and have everything be in focus. You don't want to be worrying about that when you're taking the shot of a lifetime, for sure. So eyepiece focus works for the reticle, right? Make sure you set that up before you hit the field, because your eye doesn't need to be working overdrive just to focus when you're ready to take that animal, hopefully talk about, put on your wall, and share with friends and family for years to come. So eyepiece focus is just another way to optimize an optic for you. Any questions so far on that stuff? Did I explain that okay? I've got no chats, I don't think, coming through yet. If anybody has any comments or questions, either unmute or shoot me a note here through that chat box. Another way that you can optimize an optic, this really helps in today's world. How many of you have tried to buy ammo so far this year, I guess toward the end of 2020? Anybody tried to find ammo? You're really struggling right now? Ammo is almost impossible to find. So our sighting in sessions then become extra valuable. We need to be real careful with the ammo that we have. We need to make every shot count. That's extra important now. When you're dealing with an optic, you're trying to get ready for a hunt. Many of us often have had the experience where we sit down at the range, we fire a couple of rounds, we have no idea where those rounds hit. They're off the paper. I don't know what happened. Somewhere out there in left field. When you're trying to set up an optic and you don't know where it's adjusted for, or it's not hitting on the paper, I want to teach you a really fast way to center that reticle, get yourself back to what we would call a factory zero or an optical zero, and then save ammo. Maybe your sight in will be a 3-round sight in. You've got 3 rounds right where they need to be. Let's get you back on paper. So optical zero, this is a fast way to sight in a scope. I have here, what is this one? A 3-9 basic scope. You'll want to put the scope on its lowest power. So right now I have the power selector ring on 3, right? 3 power is the lowest power. And I also have here just a plain old mirror. This mirror is going to accept the scope. I'll hold it up here so you can see it. I have the objective lens down on a mirror. And then when I look through this eyepiece, I can see 2 different reticles. Essentially, what that means is that my scope is really not centered. It's not how it shipped from the factory. Maybe it got bumped. Maybe somebody adjusted it for a different caliber. The scope is not centered. So again, I have a standard mirror and I have my eyepiece down on the mirror. And then I'm simply looking down, the objective lens. The objective lens down on a mirror. I look down the eyepiece, I see 2 reticles. If you're viewing 2 reticles, simply adjust your reticles, right? With your windage and your elevation turret, simply adjust those until 2 reticles becomes 1 reticle. What that allows you to do is put that scope back in the centered, kind of inline position that it shipped from the factory. I don't care what rifle you throw this on, just always come back to optical 0 and you'll save yourself a bunch of ammo for sure. For sure. How many of you guys have heard optical 0 before? Did we talk about that before at some of those APHA meetings? I don't know if I've talked about that before with anybody. The optical 0 essentially puts the internals of the scope back in the center where they belong. If I've cranked on my windage and elevation turrets quite a bit, who knows where that internal mechanism is. So putting the objective lens on the mirror, looking through my eyepiece, adjusting 2 reticles to look like 1 reticle, that's just centering everything up. When I then go shoot the rifle, I'm going to be very close to in line with where the rifle's pointed, right? Which basically just means I'm very close to on target with an optically centered scope. You can do this in the field as well. I know I'm a little clumsy out there. I would wish to say that I haven't done this, but I have. I've dropped rifles. Slings have broken. They've fallen off of whatever I had them perched on. Stuff happens in the field, right? So when that happens, my first fear is, oh no, I just knocked off my scope and I don't know if I'm going to be able to hit with it again. So this optical 0 trick is a great thing to know for the field as well. If you do happen to have an oops in the field, which we all have, this absolutely works for the field as well. So here's a mounted scope. I have my mirror, put my mirror on my optic, look through the eyepiece there and make the adjustments as needed. Bring that scope back to the centered condition it left the factory in. Optical 0 is great. So most of us have a survival kit. I have a survival mirror and I have used this optical 0 thing in the field before. Just put the survival mirror on the scope, see where we're at, how far off did I drift, did I create any damage by dropping that rifle or having that issue in the field. It's a great thing to know. So optical 0 is a great tool to have for yourself or for your client. Your hunt's not over because the rifle fell off your shoulder, right? It's not. Check the internals. Are they back pretty close to center? Take a follow-up shot if you can, if it won't scare all the game out of the field, and make sure that that rifle is back to sighted in. But optical 0 will get you sighted in a whole lot faster. Okay, I have a question here. Seems like scopes are better these days as far as focus on the reticle and eye relief. Is that true? Has Leupold made advancements on those fronts? That's a great question. Hey, I think every scope company is trying to get better at what they do. So dad's scopes are better now that this new generation has come out, those different things. Eye relief is something that hasn't changed a lot. Very many brands differentiate themselves by how much eye relief they have. So Thor, when you asked about does that get better, not usually. Often between brands that'll be similar. So when you're in the store looking for an optic, play with how close your eye has to be with that scope, right? A higher end scope will give you a little bit more distance, a better eye relief. I'd say that's a better choice, especially for big caliber rifles. but often that will be brand wide or at least a line wide within a brand. And then let's see, focus on the reticle. There's a lot of advancements being made on the adjustments on scopes. So I would say absolutely, scopes are getting better on the adjustment side, especially for focus of the reticles. So fast focus instead of full rotations just to get a little clearer. A lot of the optics companies are moving toward fast focus. So it takes very little adjustment to get to better focus. So great question. Great question. If you are buying a scope, really do look for an optic that has a decent eye relief. I think it'll pay off later on down the line. Good questions. Keep those coming in, guys. If you have any thoughts, send them in. I want to talk about parallax adjustment just a little bit as well. We have a lot of different options of scopes, and some optics, including those of your clients, if you're one of the guides out there, or you as a hunter, you might have an optic that has a parallax adjustment on it. So in the scope in this, I guess right now that we're looking at right now, I have my windage turret and I have my elevation turret, but then I also have a parallax adjustment. A lot of the fancier scopes nowadays come with this parallax adjustment. So I want to speak to that just a little bit as we look to optimize your optics specifically for you. The parallax is just a fancy word for focus. It's just another kind of focus, right? We already talked about the eyepiece focus. Wrong way. We already talked about the eyepiece focus, but talking about the parallax now, just a different type of focus. Eyepiece focused the reticle, right? So your parallax is what's actually going to focus the target. Anybody out there that wants to shoot slightly longer range, or some of the hunting opportunities in Alaska just require slightly longer range abilities, parallax is going to be a great addition to your whole gear setup. You're going to want to have a parallax adjustment on your scope. Again, that's just another kind of focus. All of us know that we can shoot better if we can see better. And so parallax adjustment on a scope is just another way to see better. When you're adjusting parallax, you won't be able to see this necessarily, but the parallax adjustment turret has often these increments given in yardage or mils if you're a military person, but mils, yardage, increments. Parallax is a focus. So let's say I want to shoot 100 yards. Most people look at their scope and put that parallax adjustment on 100. 100 yards, 100 yard focus on my parallax. Cool. Don't necessarily trust the yardage markers on the scope. Parallax is all about your eye, and every single one of us have different eyes, right? So focus will look different for me than it will for you. The parallax knob is for you to bring the target as clear as you can, regardless of the markings. So pass this on to a client as well. If you're a guide or if you're a hunter, know that you're not relegated to using just the numbers on your scope. I had a situation in bright light. I was shooting 100 yards and my parallax adjustment was actually at 600. That's where the target looked the most clear for me. And then sometimes under flat light, it'll go the other way. I'll have a 200 yard target, a 400 yard target, and my parallax will only be on 150 or something along those lines. So just know that parallax is about you and your eye. It's going to be different for all of us. It has nothing to do with really the numbers that are listed on that adjustment knob. Those are just to get us close, right? And then of course they have to go off of averages because they don't know your eyes. They don't know my eyes when they manufacture this scope. So just interesting stuff to note there. If you're looking to go on a hunt of a lifetime with one of these great guides here at the Expo right now, maybe you're setting up your gear, you're thinking about what you might need. I just wanted to pass on those couple of tips about optimizing an optic, maybe getting it set up to work the best it can for you. So I just want to go over that really quickly again, the couple of points that we made. When you're mounting an optic, it's very important to pay attention to the manufacturer's spec for how tight to get those scope rings. That'll make a huge difference. If you're going to have an optic failure in the field, it's possibly because of a poorly mounted rifle. So tackle it yourself. Just follow the factory spec, or take it into a store. Maybe ask your guide about that. They might have some ideas. Make sure you're mounting it correctly. While you're mounting, make sure you have that scope mounted with adequate eye relief. Make sure that that optic is far enough away from your face that doesn't hit you, but so you can still see a clear image of your target once you've mounted that rifle comfortably for you. Eye relief is one. We talked about focusing the eyepiece, making sure that your reticle's in focus, so therefore your target can also be in focus. So play around with that. And then the last thing we talked about was just parallax. It is another type of focus. If you have it on your scope, use it. Absolutely use it. Make sure that target is as clear as it possibly can be, because of course we all shoot better when we can see better. So just a couple of things about optics I wanted to pass on to you guys. Hopefully maybe helpful as you get ready for some hunts. And I want to hear all about it. So as I just wrap up those couple of points there, I kind of want to open it to chats. Down on the left-hand side of your screen, there is your little microphone button. Play with that. If you do have a question, go ahead and unmute and ask that, or go ahead and type it in on the chat window.
Yeah, Sarah, this is Wayne Kubat.
Wayne.
Can you hear me?
I do. I've got you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm a slow typer. So if a client, before he travels, if he uses the mirror to check his reticle picture before he travels, sometimes you arrive in Alaska late at night and you hop on the bush plane early in the morning, you don't get a chance to sight it in. Is that a trustworthy method to see that it maybe didn't get messed with while he travels?
Yeah, that's a great question. We all know airline handlers and how they treat our gun cases, right? I want to choke out a few of them. Oh, it's a gun. So Wayne, valid. You're getting on a plane the next morning. You don't have time to sight it in. Wayne, this mirror trick works best if your client has tried the mirror before they traveled.
Right.
So let's just say you have a guy coming for moose. He's got a 300 Win Mag, and he has it sighted in for 180 grain, whatever, Barnes bullets. Have him sight in and then put the mirror on his scope. If that scope reticle shows it's off a little bit, that's okay. That's how that's sighted in for that ammo. So have him note it down. When I looked through the mirror at my sighted in rifle, I was a little bit left and high, right? The reticles were off a little bit left and high, just a little bit. Cool. Write that down, because when he arrives in Alaska and you throw a mirror on it in moose camp and that reticle is a little bit left and high, perfect. He's good to go. If it's way off, then yeah, you know that something got bumped in transit and you're going to need to shoot it out there in the field.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
I got a question.
Yeah, go for
So
it.
I had this sheep hunter this last fall, and he had a Leopold scope. He's a phenomenal rifleman. He could really shoot. And he had a scope that had 100, 200, 300, 400, I believe 500 yards on the adjustment, the elevation adjustment.
Yeah.
And then it had
yeah.
a little button on the elevation adjustment that you would bring it back to zero, zeroed at 100, I think it was. And it worked really well. He was able to do some long shooting with that little feature. It was a lightweight scope, good in the mountains. We were on a sheep hunt. And I was really impressed with how that worked and how easy it was for him to dial the range in. I was wondering if you could tell us just a little bit about those turrets and how that all works for someone to get that up for a scope for their rifle. Right.
Sure, Thor, that's great. Did you have a good sheep hunt? I need to know the end of the story first.
Oh, he shot a sheep. He was a old codger and he couldn't climb that well, but he could shoot well. He shot a sheep for 500 yards. Yeah. He was phenomenal. He was very disciplined, and he used that. And I've never let a client shoot that far, but I had confidence after watching him use it that this would work, and it turned out my confidence was okay. We didn't have a problem with the shooting or the the way the scope worked. And yeah, it turned out great. So that's the long, I could keep with I can make the answer longer if you want.
No, that's great. I had to know how it ended up, right? You know,
It was a happy ending. Oh yeah.
there you go. That's awesome. So it's not just Leupold that offers something like that, Thor. A lot of companies do. But I do have to plug in there. I mean, maybe because I work for them, but Leupold offers one of the easiest to use step functions here for that turret you're talking about. And the short story is that, boy, it's just math. I have an engineer husband and he says regularly, it's just math. It's just math. I hate that. We all know that that shooting a rifle bullet, once that bullet leaves the rifle, it's affected by air and gravity, and it's going to pull that bullet down in a curved path. So we know that shooting long range means that where I'm looking and where I'm hitting are increasingly very different. So 200 yards where I'm looking is generally where I'm going to hit with most hunting rifles. But out there at 500 yards, Thor, you could be 97 inches different. I'm looking at the sheep of my bullet's going to hit 97 inches low. So huge differences here ballistically, just taking gravity into effect, not anything else. So what Leupold and other optics have done is made a cap that has a specific thread pitch to counteract gravity. Your client, Thor, most likely had called Leupold and said, hey, I shoot, what caliber was he shooting? Do you remember?
He was shooting a 308, and I think it was ballistically matched to 150 grain Hornady SSTs.
Oh, perfect. Okay, cool. All right, so he called in to Leupold and said, hey, I have this 308 rifle. I want to shoot these 150 grain bullets. Here's all my specifics. I'm going to go to Alaska and hunt with Thor, which means we're going to be in ridiculous areas and all sorts of terrain. and so I need a turret for my 308. And what Leupold does is etch then the specific thread pitch to counteract the gravity, essentially, for his 308. So they would have allowed him to sight in on 100 yards. His turret would have been on number 100 yards. So on number 1, I'm sighted in at 100 yards. Thor, you say that sheep is at 350 yards. Your client at that point just has to dial to 3.5, 350 yards, and pull the trigger. 500 yards, put the dial on the number 5 and pull the trigger. Ballistically, Leupold would match the details of that man's rifle and the information they were given to the turret, and it takes the guesswork completely out of dialing or shooting some of that longer range. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant to have a turret that's so easy like that. Thor, you call the yardage, I dial that into this optic, and then to take the shot. What the turret can't do is pull the trigger. So the shooter still has to be excellent in what they do. They need to have great fundamentals. They need to have the right breath cycle, the right trigger press. All of those elements still need to be there to get a hit. But the turret will absolutely be reliable as a ballistic match for distance shooting. Yeah. I do want to come back to that. Vortex has a ballistic cap. Swarovski has a ballistic cap. Zeiss has a ballistic cap. A lot of people have options. Just make sure you're very familiar with how they work before you go to the field. Most of the time you have to have a custom built cap to get the ballistic performance that your client did, Thor. I need that ballistic cap to match the ammo I'm shooting currently. I need that ballistic cap to match the conditions I'm hunting in currently. It's important that all of that matches and you know how that works before you get to the field.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Do the scopes with the different all these fancy things on them, do they have more potential for fogging and bad weather and that kind of stuff? Or I mean, it seems like the more you add on to something on the scope, you introduce a way for moisture to get in there.
Right, absolutely. Does the fancier it gets, does that make it more prone to failure? Some people say yes. Paul, our parents hunted on one-piece main tubes. You know, everything was as minimalistic as it could be. There were about 8 lenses in the original optics. Now there's 26 lenses in some of these big scopes, right? So you can get crazy fancy. And I would say that within a quality brand, you don't reduce or you don't, let's see, you don't increase the chance of a failure by getting fancy options as long as you have a quality optic. There are plenty of brands out there that just throw gizmos all over it to make it look cool, but they don't back that up with any kind of quality or warranty or ability, right? It just looks cool. And so I would do a little bit of research on the brand. What features did they put on that scope and why? And then how? How does it work? Because if it was only there to look cool, they're not going to have any instructions of how that helps you out or helps your client out for things like Thor was talking about with the ballistic drop.
I guess
So-
one of my, part of the question too is, I mean, in your company, do you see more people complain about the ones with all the gadgets on them or versus, I mean, do you see more problems?
I love that question. So to go basic, right? This is just a very basic optic. We even have fixed power, right? Fixed 4-power scope. We're back to those 6 lenses. There's almost nothing to it, right? That is about as tough as you can get in an optic. And I'm going to add this, Paul, that's also as light as you can get. So let me put this in a super cub context. You get a cub with no electronics in it. It's all basic. It's super lightweight, right? You put that thing in hard on a bush strip and it's going to survive a lot better than a weighted down. You got a 6'7" client in the back and you're way over gross, right? You put some big old heavy cub down on the same strip and you're going to have damage. You're going to crack something. So in a big old scope, the heavier you go, the more centripetal force, the more inertia, the more stress gets put on that optic when something goes wrong. You drop the rifle or you fire a heavy caliber. So more stress because the scope is heavier. So do we get complaints about fancier scopes failing more often? No, because we put a lot of effort at Leupold into making those extra tough. But under general terms, heavier is not always better, especially for field use. And I'll add field use in Alaska. Did that answer it? I believe that the lighter scopes, though they don't have all those fancy features, some people still prefer that just because it's basic. I only have to throw the rifle up. I see one crosshair. I do all the math on my head, on my own in my head. I don't shoot more than 200 yards and I'm good to go, right? So there's a promotion for that for sure. And then there's other people that say, well, all the sheep are at 400 yards. So I'm going to go shoot at 800 regularly and train with a fancy scope so I can go shoot those sheep that are all out there at 400 yards. Yeah. Great questions, guys. How about anybody else? You have your microphones muted right now. If you want to unmute and ask a question or you want to type something into the box, go for it. Deb, you'll have to kick me off of here when it's time, okay? Yeah, any other thoughts? How about, oh, sorry. I've got you, Dan.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
I know with binoculars, you can get some that are waterproofed and others that are not. How does that work with scopes on rifles? Are there some that are optimized for wet conditions or are they pretty much standard across the board?
Oh, Mitch, that's a great question. We say that waterproof is our favorite color. This is Alaska after all. So that often is a key feature that you would look for, whether that's scopes or binos or whatever else. And again, it kind of goes by brand. There are some brands that advertise across their whole scope line that they're a waterproof optic. And so I think that would be important to look for if you're on this side of a purchase. Does this brand offer waterproof as a key feature? If a optics company is going to go through the work to make something truly waterproof, they're going to put that specific all over the box. That's going to be something they're proud of. So you'll know if an optic brand is going to be waterproof or not. And it is, boy, that's important for Alaska. One thing I want to mention too is that there's two types of fogging. And that's often what we deal with in wet conditions, Southeast and others. Fogging can happen externally. So if I huff if I huff on this lens right now, I'll fog that lens. That's external fogging. And that's just going to happen with the temperature difference of the room and then my warm air on this lens. But that external fogging is going to dissipate as those temperatures neutralize. Then we also have internal fogging, which doesn't go away, right? There's moisture that collects inside the lenses and holds there and usually prevents me from seeing whatever I'm trying to shoot at. It's extremely frustrating. Mitch, I'm going to guess you probably have some stories and I'd love to hear them. You're hiking around, you've got your binoculars inside your jacket because it's been pouring rain all day. You unzip because you see something, you take those binoculars out and they're completely fogged over. I don't know if you've ever dealt with that. That's usually an external fogging issue, and that fog will dissipate, that water will dissipate with time as the temperatures neutralize. Unfortunately, no optics company can do much about external fogging, but we can do something definitely about internal fogging. So that means the seals that are put on every lens and the housing, everything is built to withstand water. Loophole Optics is waterproof, and we train, we test is the word I'm looking for. We test every optic by dunking it in a water tank. And we hope that every optic that we make in the Gold Ring series can withstand water up to 30 feet deep. So you can drop these overboard, even in salt water, fish them out, and they're just fine. So waterproof to 30 feet on Loophole Gold Ring product.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah. Mitch, was that good? Did you have other, did I answer that okay?
No, that was exactly what I was looking for. I appreciate the education.
Cool, cool. Other questions?
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Can you hear me?
I can, I got you, Dan.
Okay. Yeah, I have a couple of them turrets, and my question is, if you're have like a 35, you set it for like 3,500 feet, and then your temperature is whatever you put in, so 40 degrees. How much effect does that change if, I know you have plus or minus 2,000 feet when you set it, but if you have extreme cold, so if you're at 35 degrees and all of a sudden you're at 0 or you're at 70, how much are you looking at dropping, or can you just have to not use that? Like, if you change, because sometimes I go to Texas or I'll be in Alaska, and I've hit that a couple times, and I've got a few different turrets, but I'm not sure which one would be better to go if it's 2,000 feet elevation and colder, or is it better to stay at 3,500 foot elevation with the warmer one if you're in extreme weather? Like, is the temperature the most important or the elevation the most important?
That's an excellent question, Dan. And yeah, you truly cannot have a turret for every condition. And so I'm going to come back to the fact that generally speaking, in hunting ranges, let's say 100 to 300, you could probably push that out a little farther, but let's talk about 100 to 300 yards. And across the board, you're going to hit very similarly across all temperature ranges, across all elevations, across all humidity settings. So taking your rifle from the Wrangles down to South Texas to hunt hogs, you're going to be fine to about 300 yards. There's no difference really that you will detect needed, I guess, to compensate for by that turret. When those factors like temperature and elevation really play is in long range. So if we have somebody out there that wants to shoot a caribou at 700 yards, that's one thing. I'm looking at an 8-inch kill zone, right, essentially. And then next to them, I have a guy that wants to shoot dimes at 1,000 yards. Well, the guy that wants to shoot dimes is really going to care about temperature and elevation change because it will definitely affect precision shooting at distance. Temperature and elevation changes won't affect within hunting accuracy. That 8 inches out to about 300 yards, you won't be affected by changes in temperature. I would actually say that elevation is going to play a little more in your difference over temperature. The temperature swings won't affect the rifle or the turret as much as elevation will.
Okay, that was the main thing, was the temperature changes, because sometimes you're a little more extreme in the winter too. So, okay, that answered my question. Thank you.
Humidity actually plays a little bit more. Humidity is a greater factor actually than temperature a little bit. So that's something to play when you're crossing state lines. That plays in a little bit more. But again, for hunting accuracy, Dan, you're pretty much good to go out to 300 yards. And if you're looking to be real pinpoint accurate after that, then I would talk about different turrets for different states.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, good questions. Yeah. Deb, how are we doing for time?
Yeah, I think we're just about there if nobody has any other questions. Great presentation. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah,
I have-
thanks, Sarah.
Yes,
It's
sir.
always, but I think we got another question coming on here, so.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
This one's probably going to be more odd than normal, but has Leopold ventured into the archery scope type realm?
Tim, that's a great question. And no, we haven't really offered much in the archery optic world yet. We've played in that space. The engineers have certainly, they certainly have stuff that they've played with, I'll say that. But a lot of states don't allow us to hunt with magnified optics on bows and just yet. Crossbows are a different thing. We actually do have some crossbow offerings. So Tim, specifically what within that, you're talking about a magnified optic on archery?
Well, just ideally a combination between some minimal magnification and then also the range finding opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, their advancements in our bows are more expensive than guns these days. And the technology advancements have been so phenomenal. It's just surprising.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tim. So the rangefinder side with Leupold right now, we have the most accurate engine in our rangefinders, the most declination and inclination. Right now we have the most accurate. So Total Archery Challenge is sponsored by Leupold. Right now we're the only rangefinder they promote because of the accuracy. We have it's called the Full Draw 4, just launched. Full Draw 4 is a rangefinder specific to archery. It has different, I guess I'll call them ballistics for arrow flight path, and just an incredibly smart engine for archery. That one even actually also has our trophy scale in it, so you can measure antler width with the archery rangefinder. Has a lot of options for that archer. A lot of compensation if you're at any kind of angle. Check out the Full Draw 4, Tim. I think you'll be impressed.
Yeah, this is Thor again here. This is awesome, Sarah. There may be another question or two, but I just can't emphasize enough. Don't be shy. If you just because you book a Zoom meeting with one of our exhibitors, you know, it's just like stopping by the booth at the show. This is just in a virtual space. I just can't emphasize enough. Don't be shy. Ring us, set appointments with the exhibitors. It's the same idea. Paul, Wayne, Lyle, I see the guides online here. For the folks that are registered and attending and eligible for the prizes and eligible to be able to win that floor credit if you did book a hunt, one way or another, don't be shy. Just book a hunt. This is a new concept as far as doing a hunting show, but we can't be together in person, and just hey, set a meeting with me, set a meeting with Wayne, set a meeting with Paul. Even if you have no interest in necessarily coming on the hunt, it's just like feel just as welcome as you would be in a real space if we were in a regular convention center. So that's just what I want to say. This is a chance to talk about Alaska hunting and get to know some of the guides up here. So with that, if there's any more questions, fire away. If not, we sure appreciate everyone coming. Sarah has volumes of information. That mirror trick, I didn't know anything about that. That's just awesome. And I'll tell you, over the years, I don't know how many scopes I've seen out in the field. Probably the other guides on the call would vouch for it. As far as being weatherproof and holding up to the elements here in Alaska, I just haven't had a failure rate or seen a failure rate with Leopold scopes compared to some of the other brands out there. I'm not ashamed to say, I'm not here to plug Leopold only or something like that, but I've had really good experience with Leopold scopes in the weather here in Alaska. And I think that's the gold ring Leopold is really the standard in my mind as far as being weatherproof. So.
All right. Sarah, thank you so much. Great presentation. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And like Thor said, book some time with the outfitters. Got lots of people sitting there waiting to chat with you. Even if you just want to talk about hunting stories, they're good for it.
We can talk.
Yeah. Amen.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like I got to this meetings late. Are you guys gonna have a way to just watch, like, you know, you can't react, but just watch the old presentations that happened today?
Right. We're recording all the presentations. They should be up on that Expo website. It'll be after the Expo ends tomorrow. So it'll probably be Sunday or Monday before they get up, but we'll leave them up for a full month.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
All right. No other questions. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.